Welcome to this video, a new part of the middle game strategy series. One aim of the series is to show pawn structures, of course. Ideas related to pawn structures and what kinds of pawn structures are advantageous, what structures are to be avoided. Let's look at a sample game, and this is from 1962. Played by Petrosian, the later world champion. He became world champion 1 year later, winning against Botvinnik. Here playing white against a black player, Samuel Schweber. He's from Argentina. This was played in the Stockholm Interzonal, as mentioned, 1962. Let's see what happened in this game. Petrosian played d4, c4, as he usually did. Played closed openings most of the time, and we got a King's Indian. And Petrosian was well known for having a fantastic score against the King's Indian. He really enjoyed playing against the opening. It very much suited his style. Bishop e2 was played, castles, and bishop g5. We don't see the Petrosian system that could have been expected, but Petrosian also played other lines against the King's Indian. Here it is the Averbach, named after Yuri Averbach, a line that I also sometimes play, and due to one reason why I play the line is the kind of structure that arises here in this game. Back in 1962, this line was really quite new. People did not really know how to respond optimally. Nowadays, it is pretty much known that the most promising moves for black are c5, c5, or knight a6. c5 is probably the most solid choice. In fact, it is sharp later, but still it's theoretically speaking probably the soundest move. After d5, black plays h6 and so on. Knight a6 is aiming to structures comparable to the game, but under a little bit more favorable circumstances. Black is actually preparing the move e5 and wants white to make some sort of commitment before he plays e5. In the game, black played h6 and e5. This is also a playable line. Even nowadays it is seen sometimes, but it is not believed to be the most precise. After d5, white of course closes the position. Black has some disadvantages over knight a6. One is that the move h6 is weakening the king side a bit. This does not look very relevant, but it will be very short order. Black now played the move c6. That's not a bad idea in general, trying to get counterplay along the c file. However, after h4, black took, and now played the move knight bd7. In exactly this position, I think black needed to consider how to react to the move h4. What is the idea of h4? In fact, in the game, we will see what the idea is. White wants to push h5, and the idea is not that white is initiating a kingside attack, but if we look at what happened, h5, what white is doing is he threatens now to take on g6 and take on h6, simply winning a pawn. To be honest, sometimes this kind of pawn grab is not that advisable. There are positions like that where this pawn grab is rather risky, especially if white has played the move f3 already. The dark squares would be very weak after that. I can give you one example which does not make particularly huge sense in a way. The concrete moves, I mean. Let's say black plays this, for example, yeah, and white responds like here, and black plays, let's say a5. Yeah, I just want to show you the general idea. If white then decides to grab on h6, the dark squares here are enormously weak. And this might cost white on the king. For example, in this concrete position, even knight h5 is a possible move. White must be careful with that. What black must do after h4, he must do one or two things. He must stop the pawn. This is one possibility. However, this is something that black needs to consider carefully, as with h5 played, the move f5 gets more difficult to play because your king side is weakened. The other thing is, what black can do is try to play in a way that after h5 you don't play g5, which gives the game structure. The black player, however, here was pretty much oblivious of all of that, and after h5 he played g5. Yeah, what is the problem with this? We now get the following pawn structure: f3, a6, or normal g4. It's all about this pawn structure, the big King's Indian kingside clamp. This arises from various opening lines in the King's Indian. It can come from the Averbach, here it's probably most typical. It can come from h3 lines, h3, g4 lines, or sometimes from the Semisch. Typically lines where white is not committing his king early to an early kingside castle, but where he pushes pawns on the king side as a sort of prophylactic measure. What white really aims for is exactly this structure. Black's problem is mostly that his bishop on g7 is a dead piece. It's only looking at dark square pawns. Yeah, it's simply incarcerated. On the other hand, white's bishops are excellent. He's got e3 and e2, and they both fulfill a useful role on the queen side. Another very different, very important and sometimes not so obvious aspect is that both sides have weak squares on f4 and f5. Those two squares. The big difference, however, is that white can actually occupy this square with a knight from e2 to g3 to f5. Note that white does not want to put a knight there to let it have exchanged against the bishop. This does not help very much. You want to put a piece there when it is not possible that black takes it, really as an outpost. If we now look at the f4 square, this is a different thing. There is no knight coming to the square simply because the squares e6 and g6 are safely guarded by white pawns. Note that this pawn structure is hugely different if the pawn is not on h5 but instead on h3. If white pawn would be here on h3, then knight, let's say f8, g6 to f4 would be possible. It's exactly this structure that is the problem for black. He's lacking space and a useful plan. The only constructive thing really that black can try to do here is to get the dark squared bishop exchanges somehow. To exchange it somehow. It's not difficult. It's not easy though. It takes lots of time. And it's difficult to do because you have little space. Nowadays, this pawn structure is much better known than back then. So nowadays, a good master level player probably would avoid this like the plague. But back then, it could easily happen, even in an interzonal tournament, which was one of the qualification stages for the World Championship back then. But let's see how Petrosian continues. b5 was played by black, trying to get some play on the queen side. This is a slightly debatable decision, because it also weakens the queen side even further. However, it's difficult to give black a very constructive advice, as this structure is really very, very unfavorable. a4 now was played. Very, very important. white gets some play on the queen side going as soon as possible. He has a totally stable center, so he plays on the flanks. Black went b4. Yeah, there's only a choice between various evils. You can also take, but after that the a6 pawn will be a very, very substantial weakness. So b4. And yeah, here we come to one of the first interesting situations. Where does the knight go? Yeah, to a2 or to b1. Petrosian goes to b1. This is a better square compared to a2. If you go to a2, black plays, let's say a5, it's not so clear where the knight is heading. It might go here or here to b3 or d3, but from there, the best thing I can do is maybe take a piece that appears on c5 if a knight comes up there. But the knight is not attacking anything. From b1 and now d2, the knight is aimed at the juicy c4 square, where it looks at a5 and d6. So the knight really has a great post on c4. This is one reason why b5 is a debatable decision, because after this a4 sequence, white really gets those additional points of entry on the queen side. Schweber now went with knight c5. Maybe he was thinking that all this is not very problematic for him, because he can play knight c5, which, yeah, in a way closes the c-file. However, Petrosian now played a very strong move. And a move that always needs to be considered carefully. White has got almost all pawns on light squares, and he's got a dark squared bishop. This dark squared bishop is normally very powerful and important to guard the dark squares that are just weakened by the fact that all pawns are on light squares. However, here white has a very strong move in capturing the knight. Why is this especially strong? The reason is that after d takes, the pawn structure is changed for white in a favorable way, because the c5 pawn now is something that white can attack. White also has the excellent c4 outpost for his knight. From c4 the knight attacks 2 pawns. White also has gotten a protected pass pawn, which at the moment is not super relevant, but it is important in the long run, definitely. So white has gained by taking there, but he has given up the bishop. So are the dark squares a problem? In fact, in this specific situation, they are not, because black has no way to enter white's position and use those dark squares. Yeah, this is a totally different animal with the bishop on g7 than, let's say, the bishop being on b6 and black playing c4. If you just imagine the bishop would come to b6 from black and he would be able to play c4, this bishop would have huge activity in white's camp, but it is on g7 and cannot really do much. He also cannot enter with the queen. And now the next strong move. Petrosian now plays bishop b5. This is just the strongest move in the position. Why to b5? The big point is white wants to play a setup like this: knight c4, knight e2, knight to g3. Those are the ideal spots for the knights. The knights attack pawns and they look at the important square here on f5. The bishop is well placed on b5 because it does two things. It possibly allows a trade of bishops. Trading the light squared bishops, of course, would be fantastic for white. If we look at the move bishop d7, for example, white gladly will take here, let's say it's like this, and then play this knight to c4 and the other knight to f5. With the light squared bishop being exchanged, this f5 weakness is even worse, as there is no piece that can capture there. Theoretically speaking, a knight could guard the f5 square, but yeah, this is difficult to achieve. After knight b6, rook c1, yeah, black is in dire straits. The knight will come to f5 and then white will slowly but surely build up the pressure to win the c5 pawn. Black player went bishop b7, and now knight e2. We complete our development and want to go here. With the bishop on b7, which this bishop does not look very nice here, yeah, looking at this here, but he needed to move it somewhere, and bishop d7 was very undesirable, as we have seen. Yeah, knight e2, and now black went knight e8. Here we come to the next great decision by white, and the second reason why this is a classic of positional play. Petrosian now decided to capture on e8. It's a funny capture. You rarely see a good-looking bishop taking a knight on the back rank, but it is simply the best decision that white can make here. Why? The position is very, very closed. At the moment there is no open file, so the knights gain in strength. Black's knight was just about to jump to d6, where he might be able to trade a knight coming to c4, or even under favorable circumstances take on b5. Yeah, the knight coming to d6 is an improvement for black. And with the capture, we come to a typical situation where we can argue that what is important is what's left on the board and not what has been traded. The pieces that are left, if we look at this position now, yeah, or this looks very, very normal. The pieces that are left are two knights against two bishops, and we see that the f8 bishop is still terrible. It's looking at its own pawn. It has no way to be activated, while the white knights are ready to jump here, and they put huge pressure on black's position. The c5 pawn is just a terrible weakness. Bishop c8, yeah, ready to capture the knight coming to f5. White absolutely never wants to put the knight there when it can be captured. Or maybe never is a bit much. There are always some concrete considerations, but it rarely is a good idea. For example, if white play this now, black can maybe, okay, this is not working, to be honest. I was thinking about moves like that, where black might be able to enter with the queen. But it's not working here for concrete reasons. Yeah, I mean, I should show the reasons. I'm sorry about that. Here there is also white can take, and still there is nothing going on. Plus there's possibly rook g1, which also refutes this idea. In any case, you want a piece on f5 and not a pawn. Yeah, how did Petrosian continue? With patience. You have all the time in the world. He castled. Why not? Yeah, you want two rooks involved in this battle against the c5 pawn. Rook d8, king g2. And now white is building up. Yeah, an ideal setup. The c5 pawn is the target. Black now went queen a6. Yeah, this does not look very good as it gives up the e5 pawn. But yeah, what exactly should black play? Very, very difficult to imagine how black could defend here. One possible way to continue could be bishop b7, just marking time. Yeah, and how does white continue? One idea is knight e3, intending to put a knight on f5 when there's a capture possible. This is one idea. Or white could try to reposition the g3 knight all the way to d3. This is also a possible way to improve the position. Black really has no counterplay. The only thing that you need to watch out for are piece sacrifices here, or f5 at some very, very favorable moment. Very hard to imagine that's happening. Yeah, if we consider this idea, maybe knight h1 is an idea. Let's say black marks time. And here we are. Now the idea would be to play knight e3 and then take on c5. Yeah, white can maneuver behind the pawn chains, and he really has time to find his optimal setup. In the game, Schweber played queen to a6. Yeah, and now it's an interesting situation. This was giving up the e5 pawn, and I think what black tried to do is he wanted to sort of bait white to take the pawn and then get a little bit of activity. In fact, here Petrosian did not need to take the pawn on e5. He did so, but he didn't need to do it. He also had all those strengthening ideas that I showed before after bishop d7. For example, this maneuver is still possible. However, the capture is no big deal now. You always should be very very cautious with cashing in from very favorable positions. Sometimes people give up their whole strategic advantage for just one pawn. And here we really need to check if we want to take this pawn and activate black's bishop. For example, if we look at this, I played rook c7 first. But this is what I was talking about. Black now gets this bishop on the diagonal and gets a little bit more breathing space for this piece. What white needed to do, he needed to check beforehand if this is a problem or not. In fact, it turns out that this bishop is basically pointing into thin air. There is nothing that it attacks. And especially the white king position is very, very secure, as everything is shielded by this big pawn chain. Yeah. After some preparation, e5 was possible to play. Yeah, if black now takes on e5, which he did, white has a favorable transformation. Yeah, but what else is there? White is threatening knight f5 or pushing the pawns further. Black took on e5, knight e5, rook e5, queen takes, and rook c5. This way of simplification was clearly envisioned by Petrosian beforehand, and now white has a pretty easy winning endgame. The point is that a5 hangs and is not possible to defend. White still has the d-pawn, and he's got those ideas of activating the knight. The bishop c8, he just grabbed here and traded down to winning rook endgame. Yeah, 2 rooks actually. The point is that the d-pawn is just far too quick. d7, and here the black player resigned. Yeah, there are many ways now to win the game. The simplest is after, let's say, king e7 to just promote. And white wins the king and pawn endgame by infiltrating. He still has this this b-pawn as the winner. Or alternatively, black could have played rook d8, and then we set this in motion. Yeah, and now white can strengthen his position at will. King here, king g4, and so on. A very nice strategic display by Petrosian. Yeah, what to remember from this game? That's the key point of those games that we look at. You want to learn pawn structures and motifs. This pawn structure that was created here is really, in almost all cases, hugely favorable for white. The only exception could be where black is very much ready to get this bishop activated. Just, I mean, it's very unrealistic to get this, but let's say this bishop would be on c7. Then it's a different matter with black activating this piece along here. But with the bishop entombed on b7, on g7, this is a fantastic position for white. He has the huge space advantage, the f5 square, and based on this big clamp on the position, he can play on the queen side. This was really a model game for this structure. Things to remember: knight to b1, a much more purposeful retreat than to a2, because you get to the good square on c4. The capture here initiated in favorable pawn structure transformation, after which the c-pawn becomes very weak. And this capture, very strong to make sure that the knight is not reaching the strong blockading square on d6. After that, white made sure that the whole structure stayed close, So the black bishops never got any activity, and long term those pawns proved to be too fatally weak to maintain. This kind of pawn structure really pops up time and time and again in those openings if black does not really know what he's doing. So these lines like the Averbach can really be recommended for white players if you want an interesting weapon against the King's Indian. Against less experienced opposition, you very often we get those kind of one-sided games. While if black knows what he's doing, okay, it might be equal, but it's still interesting to play. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this instructive game that maybe introduced a new kind of pawn structure to you that you now will be able to maybe play for as white or white as black. Thanks for watching.